All right. Well, let's talk about Joe Kelly. I think probably of all the elements of the book, at least in terms of how Joe Kelly's narrative style approach, this might be where we are the most in disagreement here, Dan. I alluded to it in my kind of opening rant. I read Joe Kelly, and especially this Joe Kelly. Yes, I do concede that it is a dialed down version of that we've had in maybe like some non ASM books over the last few years, but like it's I feel like Joe Kelly writes dialogue and scene play like it's being shot out of a machine gun. It's just
Yeah.
so much happening at once, and it's it my brain has a hard time processing how Joe Kelly paces things. Um, you know, I I think he is sometimes thinking too far ahead with his jokes, to the point that he blows three or four jokes just to land one good one. I think that he is thinking too far ahead with his references, where he blows a couple of them just to point out, hey, that's a Scott Pilgrim reference, which, by the way, I would never have gotten. And also, why are we talking about Scott Pilgrim in a Spider-Man book right now? You know what I mean? Like, I I am just not comfortable reading a Joe Kelly book, and I'm not saying like not comfortable like in a it makes me feel triggered kind of a way. I just mean like I have a hard time, kind of submitting to the narrative when it just feels like so much is kind of arresting my senses here and being fired at me that I'm like, okay, what do I actually need to pay attention to, and what is just like utter nonsense that is going to be completely gone and forgotten, i.e. the first half of this book. So I mean, but where do you land on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can land more positive on it than you do, but I can't like refute any of the things that you said because I often agree with those things simultaneously. I think yes, it's like a machine gun, but it's also like I think he really struggles with transitions between jokes or scenes because like just as you're trying to wrap your head around one thought, it's moving on to the next as if like it's like almost like a verbal diarrhea of some sort. But they're not. It's not as smooth as the flow of diarrhea, like if you will, Mark. If I'm gonna extend this metaphor.
Phrases I didn't think we would hear on Amazing Spider Talk, but here we are.
Look, me, Mr. Smooth Talker, right here. So, like, take a lesson, Joe Kelly. This is how you connect an idea to another idea.
This is how you have smooth diarrhea.
Okay. So, but like, what I mean to say that is like, it's like these are very like specifically like chunked out. I'm leaning into it again. But each idea is like an island, into itself, a floater, if you will. But they don't necessarily blend like or organically from one to the next. I am digging a hole here for myself. It reminds me, maybe not like an Ultimate Spider-Man related, but it reminds me of some of like Jonathan Hickman's more kind of like elevated stories, like his Avengers run, where like he's clearly laying something out, and I know that he gets it. But right. I think his confidence in the audience to get it is like way overconfident. And the same is true with like Joe Kelly's approach to humor. It's like maybe like it all makes sense to him, but he's not giving us enough to really make the connections. And so when you're working so hard to get the joke on each thing, it gets hung up. It doesn't have that flow. So I agree with you on that. And I think that's definitely present in this book.
Yeah.
But I also think like in some regards it worked in some of the places where it was utilized here. Like Spider-Man pulling off this huge acrobatic thing while fighting a guy and saving another guy and just having verbal diarrhea of these jokes. Like,
Yep.
to me, that is characteristic of Spider-Man, that he would use humor as a anxiety mechanism. Like, and that the jokes don't all land, I think, is also very Spider-Man. Like, if you read the Stan Lee run, you know, like, he's just firing jokes off nonstop, and not all of them are funny.
Yeah.
You know, you know, like, I got a real legit laugh out of Temu Doctor Strange. Like,
Right.
is it going to age like milk?
Yes.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
But it was good in the moment, for sure.
Yeah, and did Stan Lee's like pop culture references age like milk?
Yes.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
mean,
they
you
did.
know, there's like
Yeah.
George Burns jokes in Stanley or whatever. I mean, you know, so and I would, and you know, to be positive, what I will also say is this is probably the most effortlessly we have been in Peter's head and in Peter's perspective. You know what I mean? Like even when Zeb, I always felt, and maybe this is unfair of me, that when Zeb kind of got inside Peter's head, he almost had to make a show of it, because like the fact of the matter is, both in large swaths of the Dan Slott run and also the Nick Spencer run, like we just got so far away from like Peter being the main character, you know, like it's you know, it wasn't always his story. It was Harry's story or MJ's story or, you know, Doc Ock's story or whatever, you know, whatever, whoever the creator was in the moment. And, you know, even with like Doctor Strange showing up and Doctor Doom showing up and everything, like this was very clearly a Peter story.
Absolutely.
And like, you know, the fact that we have to kind of call that out and celebrate it, I mean, probably speaks to larger issues in the Spider Office right now, but that's neither here nor there. Like, that's good. This is a good thing, you know, like this is, it is good to write a Spider-Man book from Spider-Man's perspective. Thank you, Joe Kelly, for doing that in a way where it didn't feel like you were actually looking for a round of applause to do it. You just did it, you know, like that's praiseworthy in my opinion.
And it seems like he's having a lot of fun doing it, you know, which makes me have fun. You know, like I can feel an energy in this book that's like, oh, I'm having a good time being here. So I wanted to ask you about this. Like, you know, this leans back into the kind of like thing I think a lot of people have been frustrated from, like the Brand New Day run, kind of like reestablishing like as a kind of core tenet of Peter, and I would argue that it's, you know, like probably an exaggerated version of what like Romita and Lee and Ditko did, you know, beyond what they did, which is like Peter the eternal screw up, you know, like it's one thing where like, you know, he can't show up for a date because of Spider-Man. It's another thing for him to like be so all over the place, losing every, you know, item, you know, his wallet, his camera, his whatever. And I honestly thought that was building to some kind of reveal of some kind, and maybe it is, but it wasn't here. But like, what do you think about like this characterization of Peter? And then do you think that it's a fair kind of follow up to like what Zeb Wells did with the character?
That's, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, is it fair? No, I don't think it's fair. I think we kind of, but like, I feel like at the same time, this kind of seems to be the way with Spider-Man. Like we are constantly bringing this character back to this place, whether we want him to be or not. You know, I'm not surprised by it. I guess that's more what I would say at this point. Do I like it? No, I don't like it. I wish we can see some semblance of growth here, you know, and no, this isn't me saying like growth is having a certain relationship but like, you know, like, yes, I think Peter struggling to balance Spider-Man with his normal life will always remain a core part of his character, and should be a core part of his character.
Yeah, I agree.
We you know, he should not figure it out. Wins should not come easily for Peter Parker. You know what I mean? Like I you know, but like, should Peter be giving his new love interest a burned record. I don't know. I mean, like, it's a sight gag. I got that, so like there was no harm in it, but like, you would think a functional adult would know I shouldn't give my girlfriend, the record she wanted, but because it was, I'd rather see him be like, oh, either lie and be like, oh, I didn't get it, or I broke it doing something, whatever. You know what I mean? Like instead of just being like, here, like he's a freaking idiot.
Yeah.
I think that's where like we have creators who lean too far into this. Well, Peter's a screw up and can't like do functional things or functionally explain why he screwed up. Like to me, we got to move past that. But like we also seem to have a refusal to move past that every time, especially when we kind of get a reset of the character creatively like this.
It's a sort of Archie-ification of this character. Like there's always going to be a reversion to the norm. I will say, as much as I agree with you on all of that, the thing that like made it work or be less painful for me is that no one really gives him a hard time about it.
No, that's true.
Like they're not beating up on him or being like, I'm so disappointed in you, Peter. Right? Like, and in that regard, like if I really want to no prize this, like it does in that way feel like a continuation to me of the Zeb Wells run, which is like Shay is like, I'm going to date you and I'm not going to ask questions about it. Like, I'm just going to trust that whatever you're doing, is true for you. Now, maybe that's not the most healthy like thing to build a relationship on, but that's how it was characterized. And so that feels true here, and she even like playfully, plays with them like, hey, we're 95 minutes into a date and you haven't run out the door yet. Like that's the kind of thing a couple like would do. I'm like that with my wife all the time, which is like picking at her, repeated flaws in a way that couples do,
Yes.
Which is maybe not great for the relationship. But.
It sounds healthier in your head than on paper, I swear.
Sure. But whether it's healthy or not, that's the way people are, like in relationships, And like Aunt May at the end of the Zeb Wells run, she kind of like comes to accept like, oh, Peter's life is going to be a shambles, but he's doing good, and he's living up to Uncle Ben. And so when she sees him here, whether this was intentional by Joe Kelly or not, I'm choosing to read into it this way. She doesn't give him crap about it because she trusts Peter in some way. So in that regard, I was like, okay, like maybe accidentally falling into this, but I can at least accept it as the reader, as kind of a following something. I'll take the littlest bit I can get. Anyway, I thought that was, at least fairly solid. So yeah.